Wow. You've given us some really fascinating material to really look into together here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix.
It is.
We have, these sort of reasoned principles about how the mind works, almost a philosophical approach.
Right.
And then on the other hand, a collection of observations and experiments,
Hmm.
exploring the human mind in action.
Yeah, it's like where those two meet.
Yeah,
That's where we are today.
exactly. It's that intersection that we're looking at today, and it's
Yeah.
it's really quite fascinating.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found so compelling about it is this idea that our beliefs can really shape our reality in a very powerful way,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to our physical health.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting evidence from the study of hypnosis
Right.
that seems to suggest that connection very strongly.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit. This idea of the dual nature of the mind, or the objective and subjective mind.
Okay.
How is this presented in the material?
Well, it's interesting. They're not presented as like two separate entities, living inside of you. It's
Right.
more like two different styles of mental operation
Right.
within a single individual.
Right.
The fundamental idea is that you are one unified person,
Right.
but your mind has different ways of working.
Oh, yeah.
And thinking about an outer or objective mind and an inner or subjective mind is offered as a helpful way to understand these different functions.
Got it. So two different modes of processing within the same system.
That's right.
And the main difference between the two seems to be in how they approach reasoning.
Exactly.
So how they arrive at conclusions about what's true.
Yes.
The objective mind is described as being able to use both inductive and deductive reasoning.
Precisely.
So it's got a very adaptable approach to figuring things out.
Yeah, think of it this way. The objective mind is like a scientist,
Okay.
gathering evidence and testing theories.
Okay.
It observes facts, it measures what it finds, and hypothesizes about what might be true based on its findings.
So it's actively engaging with the world around us
Yes,
to figure out how things work.
that's right.
Now, the subjective mind seems to operate in a very different way.
It does.
Tell me about that.
Well, the subjective mind is presented as being limited to a primarily deductive reasoning.
Okay.
So it starts with a premise, an assumption,
Okay.
and then it follows through logically to the consequences,
Okay.
regardless of whether that initial premise is actually true or not.
So it doesn't go through that initial process of observation and fact gathering.
It doesn't.
It just takes what it's given
Yeah.
as a starting point.
Yeah, it takes whatever it's given as a starting point and then
Yeah.
runs with it.
Okay. Even if that initial input is completely wrong.
Precisely. The analogy of a computer executing instructions is quite fitting here.
Okay.
The computer will faithfully carry out the program,
Right.
no matter if the program itself is based on flawed information.
Yeah.
So the subjective mind accepts suggestions, beliefs, or ideas without question.
Right.
And then proceeds to work out their logical implications.
So it doesn't have that kind of critical faculty to assess
It doesn't.
whether that initial suggestion is even valid.
Right.
Okay. So that's a really key difference.
Yes.
The objective mind is the investigator, the questioner,
Yes.
always looking for evidence.
Right.
The subjective mind is the acceptor, the implementer,
That's a good way to put it.
just taking instructions as given.
Yeah, taking instructions as true.
Okay, so what are the implications of this impressibility of the subjective mind?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that because the subjective mind operates deductively and accepts suggestions readily,
Okay.
it becomes largely influenced by the objective mind,
Okay.
both your own conscious thoughts
Hmm.
and potentially the thoughts and suggestions of others.
Right, and this is where the phenomena of hypnosis
Exactly.
becomes so relevant.
Yeah.
The material that you shared highlights how in hypnosis, someone's personality can seem to completely shift based on the hypnotist's suggestion.
Right.
Like, they believe that they're a swimmer or a bird
Yeah, or a soldier.
or a soldier,
Uh-huh.
and they act out those roles with such conviction.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It really is. So how does that help us understand this?
Well, what's so revealing is that temporary identification.
Oh, okay.
The individual under hypnosis isn't just pretending.
Right.
For that period, their subjective mind has accepted the suggestion as truth.
Okay.
And their actions and even their physiology align with that belief.
Wow.
It really illustrates just how impressible the subjective mind is.
Yeah.
It takes what it's given as true and acts accordingly.
It's like the objective mind is directly feeding information to the subjective mind.
Right.
And the subjective mind is just saying, okay.
Got it. Running program. being a bird.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And while the material touches on some of the more extraordinary claims that are sometimes associated with hypnosis.
Yeah, like thought reading and things like that.
Right.
Right.
It emphasizes that the core takeaway here, at least for our purposes right now,
Yes.
is this profound suggestibility
Uh-huh.
and the way that beliefs can be implanted and adopted.
Yes. And it also points out very wisely, I think, the importance of self-control
Right.
regarding any such faculties.
So we're not getting sidetracked into debates about psychic abilities or anything like that.
No, not today.
Right. The more fundamental point here is the power of suggestion
Yes.
and how readily the subjective mind accepts what it's told.
Accepts what it's given.
Right. And then the material goes on to this fascinating idea of the subjective mind as the builder of the body.
Yes.
This sounds huge.
Well, it is a really key concept. And
Yeah.
what's remarkable is based on the observations in hypnotic states.
Okay.
The apparent ability of the subjective mind to diagnose illnesses and even suggest remedies, showcasing a level of understanding of how the body works that can sometimes surpass conscious medical knowledge.
So someone under hypnosis might be able to articulate what's wrong with their body
Right.
in a way that they couldn't when they were fully conscious.
That's the implication, yes.
Wow, that's a huge claim.
It is.
And then what's even more striking
Even more strikingly.
is that there are instances where the subjective mind, through the power of suggestion alone,
Yes.
can initiate healing processes
Wow.
without any material intervention.
Right.
So like the belief in perfect soundness
Right.
impressed upon the subjective mind
Yeah.
seems to translate into actual physical recovery.
Exactly. It's really quite remarkable.
This really highlights the powerful connection between our minds and our bodies.
It does.
It suggests that our beliefs aren't just these abstract thoughts floating around.
Yeah.
They can have very real effects on our physical state.
Absolutely.
So we see how powerfully the subjective mind can be influenced externally.
Yes.
But what about its inherent capabilities,
Okay.
particularly as the builder of the body?
Well, the material draws two key inferences from these observations.
Okay.
Firstly, that the subjective mind is inherently impersonal.
Okay.
It doesn't have its own independent sense of self. Its sense of identity comes from its association with the individual's objective mind.
Okay.
So it will adopt whatever personality or belief system the objective mind or a hypnotist impresses upon it.
So it's kind of like a mirror,
Yeah.
reflecting whatever is presented to it.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
And the second inference is that the subjective mind is the creative power within us,
Okay.
the actual builder of the body, constantly working to manifest the conditions that align with the beliefs that it holds.
And this leads to what the material calls this fundamental principle.
Yes.
Our body represents the aggregate of our beliefs.
It is a profound statement,
It really is.
especially considering the impressibility of the subjective mind.
Right. So think about it in terms of everyday beliefs. If you have this strong fixed belief that you're susceptible to every cold and flu that's going around,
Uh-huh.
and that, certain minor symptoms inevitably lead to full-blown illness,
Yeah.
what happens?
Well, according to this framework, that belief is impressed upon your subjective mind,
Right.
which accepts it without question
Okay.
and then sets about creating the bodily conditions to match that belief.
So the very act of believing we're going to get sick might, in a way, make us more likely to actually become sick,
It's possible.
because the subjective mind takes that as truth.
Yeah, it takes that as an instruction and runs with it.
Wow. And similarly, the material talks about the belief in the efficacy of medicine, and it acknowledges that medicine can be genuinely helpful,
Yes.
but it frames it within this context of belief.
Right.
So if you believe that a certain medication will cure you,
Yes.
that belief is a powerful influence on your subjective mind,
It-
which can then work to facilitate that healing process.
That's right.
So it's not that medicine doesn't work.
You're right.
It's that its effectiveness is intertwined with our belief in it,
Exactly.
which the subjective mind then acts upon.
It's a fascinating interplay, isn't it?
It really is.
Between belief and physiology.
Yeah.
The material isn't dismissing conventional medicine at all.
Right.
It simply suggests that relying solely on external remedies might be limiting our understanding of our own innate healing capabilities.
So the key point is that the error lies not in acknowledging the potential benefits of medicine,
Yes.
but in believing that it's the only
Are the highest.
or the highest avenue to healing.
And overlooking the power of our own minds.
Right, and the impressibility of the subjective mind.
Exactly.
This really shifts the focus inward, doesn't it?
It does.
If the subjective mind is this powerful builder, so readily influenced by our thoughts and beliefs,
Yes.
then we actually have more agency than we might realize.
Yes.
So if we understand that the subjective mind is constantly working to manifest our deeply held beliefs in our physical bodies, then we can intentionally cultivate beliefs that support health and well-being.
Yes.
We can consciously impress upon our subjective mind the idea of our body as being a perpetual fountain of life,
That's a beautiful image.
constantly renewing and regenerating itself.
Yes.
So it's about shifting from this mindset of the body being a fragile machine, constantly under threat,
Yeah, always on the verge of breaking down.
right, to one of inherent resilience and vitality,
Exactly.
and consciously feeding that idea to our subjective mind.
Precisely. And the driving force behind this shift is our own desire impressed through our own conscious thought.
Okay.
So our objective mind can choose the thoughts and beliefs it wants to impress upon the subjective mind.
Right.
And the subjective mind, by its very nature, will accept those impressions and work to bring them into reality in our physical bodies.
So it's about taking conscious control of the messages we're sending to our own internal builder.
That's a good way to put it.
Recognizing that it will likely accept them as truth.
Exactly.
And the material concludes by stating that creating healthy conditions in our bodies is just as feasible as creating unhealthy ones.
Right.
The key is a deeply rooted belief in our own inherent power of life.
A belief in our own life force, our own vitality.
And recognizing the immense influence of our beliefs on our physical reality.
Given that impressibility of the subjective mind.
Right. This has been a truly eye-opening exploration into the nature of the mind.
It has.
And the power of belief.
And for you, the listener, what probably stands out is this remarkable power you possess through your own mind.
Yeah.
Particularly this incredibly receptive nature of what we're calling the subjective mind. And the profound influence of your beliefs, given that it tends to accept as true what it is given.
That raises a really crucial question for your own reflection.
It does.
Given that the subjective mind so readily accepts what it's given as true, how consciously are you examining the beliefs you hold? Are you simply accepting ideas and assumptions without deeper consideration? Or are you actively using your objective mind to assess their validity?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
It is.
To really engage that objective mind.
Right. It emphasizes the importance of thinking for yourself.
Yes.
About what you choose to believe.
Absolutely.
Because if the subjective mind acts on what it's given, then the quality of those inputs, your beliefs, becomes so important.
Incredibly important.
In shaping your reality.
It's foundational, really.
Especially your physical well-being.
Yes.
So you have to be your own investigator.
You do.
Your own source of truth, rather than passively accepting everything that you hear.
So here's a final thought for you to contemplate.
Okay.
If your subjective mind is so readily influenced, what beliefs are you currently allowing to shape your reality? And perhaps more importantly, are those beliefs truly serving your best interests?
That's a great question.
We encourage you to explore that question further in your own thoughts.
Yes.
And to really think for yourself about what you hold to be true.
Excellent food for thought.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.